All right. Hey, Cory, thanks for joining us today. Really excited to jump in and talk a little bit about ChatGPT and how you're integrating that into your Coach CRM app and also some of the evolution of how GPT is kind of changing the landscape for coaching and for the frontline sales manager's job. Something we're trying to keep our eye on, and I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about it. So maybe just to kick things off, if you could introduce yourself, your role, and talk a little bit about what you're doing with Coach CRM.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ray. So I'm Cory Bray, co-founder of CoachCRM. We're a SaaS platform to help sales managers become better coaches and help executives get more out of their sales organizations. And so we started doing this after years of training sales managers on coaching, wrote a book on coaching. And it was funny, we'd do a training session and then the executives would come in and say, how do we know it's working 6 months from now? And they'd say, what are we looking at? What are we going to inspect? And I said, well, they have spreadsheets. And that didn't work. So what we realized was that there needed to be a better way for managers to stay on top of coaching, execs to understand what's going on, and then for other folks like enablement, operations, third-party consultants to come in and work with teams to help either support the coaching or coach the coaches. So that's pretty much what I spend my life doing.
Yeah, no, and it's a very cool app. I'm excited to see what you're doing, both integrating kind of skills coaching, integrating the one-on-ones, giving the manager a place to kind of capture that information. I think it's definitely sorely needed. But today let's focus on Chat GPT and kind of how you're integrating AI. Can you start and just say a little bit about, what inspired you to take a look at that? I know everybody's trying to figure out what it means to their business, but how were you looking at that, and what are some of the benefits you see integrating that into your application?
Yeah, I was very skeptical at first because, like all of you, you look out there and there's a million automated email writers, and I don't think the world needs more emails. We've got plenty of those. But eventually, I was in a conversation with someone and started thinking, well, there's a big problem when it comes to sales methodology, adoption, adherence, and longevity, because people often default back to their comfort zone. And if there's not an easy way to keep that rigor around sales methodology, which works if you use it, then the companies don't get as much out of it as they could. And sometimes they revert back all the way and end up in a really bad spot. So I was thinking, okay, well, that's an interesting use case. So what if we could train ChatGPT on very company specific information, such as their sales methodology, the content that they have, their sales process, and then supplement that with coaching best practices that either come from us as experts in coaching or folks like Ray who run sales consulting practices with a much broader scope, get that in there. And so as a V1, a manager can ask a question and it can get an answer immediately, as opposed to the manager going to their boss and saying, hey, we need enablement to work on this. And then it goes to the head of enablement, who goes to a junior enablement person, spins up a project that they've probably never done before. And so they work, do their best, maybe read some modern sales pros posts, Google some things, whatever, come up with something, present it to the head of enablement, it goes back to the head of sales, takes it back to the manager. And they're like, too late. That's not what I wanted, or it's fine. One of those things happens. So that's a ridiculous loop. Instead, why can't the managers get what they need immediately? That's what I'm going for with this feature that we're building.
Absolutely, and yeah, having that real time access and something we talk about a lot, coaching in the moment, right? I mean, you don't have time to do a lot of research or go back. You want to be able to have that conversation, hit them where they are, and really enable them to kind of move forward. I'm curious how you see, Chat GPT and the integration you've done changing the frontline manager's job, and how does that affect coaching?
Well, I think they can get better access to more detailed and specific information faster. There's the old saying, read the manual. And one, that's annoying because nobody wants to go read page 73, paragraph 6. Second of all, they don't necessarily know where to look. And finally, a lot of companies don't have the manual. So the idea with coaching is I'll use the analogy of salespeople using customer stories. Most salespeople know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 customer stories, and they use the same ones no matter what. It's round peg, square hole, square peg, round hole, whatever it is. I know these 5 things. I've got them good. I'm going to figure out a way to fit those into my conversation. Same thing happens with coaching. you've got a limited number of tools, and you're applying those in every single coaching conversation. Whereas the expert coach that's got more experience, more expertise, and is a little more flexible can come in and approach skill set challenges different than mindset challenges, even though it might be on the same topic, such as uncovering pain or setting next steps. Or they're better at doing things like root cause analysis. If you're coaching someone that isn't asking good discovery questions, not telling good customer stories, not setting next steps, not handling objections well, you could go through each of those over time, which takes forever. Or you could say, there's a root cause here. They're not doing good pre-meeting prep because they're not prepared to do any of those things. So maybe I'll coach that instead of those other things. And by coaching pre-meeting prep in this example, I solve for those other things. So asking ChatGPT, hey, I've got this rep that's struggling with all of these things. Well, we can train it to do root cause analysis because the number of scenarios in sales is not that great. We're talking hundreds or thousands of things, which for a computer is the smallest data set in the world. But for a human, especially a first or second time manager, it's not going to be top of mind, or for any manager that's in a rush and just wants to gut check their evaluation.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic then to have real examples and be able to pull that together, aggregate that kind of in real time on which skills need to be coached and where to focus. Because I know that's something, we spend a lot of time on is what are the coaching priorities? You can't give them 10 things to fix at once or they're likely to get none of them done. But how do we prioritize? And if ChatGPT can help us get to that root cause, I think that's really interesting. And I guess a follow up to that on, pipeline and deal coaching. I mean, now if you have access, if you can kind of go crawl that information and come back, how does that change the conversation?
Well, you hook into Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using, and we're used to using ChatGPT as the interface. I mean, we as in the royal we. Yeah. You go to the website and you type in a question, it gives you some kind of response. Well, you can have it ask questions automatically. It doesn't have to have you type something into the computer. So if it's constantly asking the data questions and it says, hey, data, how are we feeling about Cory's next steps? Well, if the data says, I'm not feeling too hot about it, well, now we can start surfacing coaching suggestions to the manager. And then we can start showing the executives and the enablement team that we're surfacing coaching suggestions to the manager. And all of a sudden, you've got this ecosystem that's supportive of coaching. And a lot of times, the reason why people don't coaching works. If you don't believe coaching works, then I don't know what to tell you. Most people believe coaching works. If you do it, and the reasons people don't do it is it's intimidating. People don't know how. They feel like they're micromanaging. They think it takes a lot of time. I was talking to somebody the other day. I said, how long does a coaching conversation take? I think it was 3 people in there. And one said 30 minutes. One said 20 to 30 minutes. One said 20 minutes. And I said, could it take 3 minutes? And all of them said no. And then I coached one of them in 3 minutes. They were like, oh, wow. Okay. Interesting. So there's this lack of mastery around coaching, because a lot of great salespeople get promoted to manager. We all know that. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you got to go coach. The only thing they know is to go do what someone else did to them who was in that same scenario. And so it's just this never ending cycle. Well, if we can insert something that can bring some automated expertise that's trained by Ray and other folks that really know this stuff inside and out, then boom, you're getting the best information, the best insights, diagnosis, prioritization, real time. And then you can go execute in those live meetings that only humans can have.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that it's really eye-opening to have access to that kind of information. And, it reminds me of an earlier conversation we had about kind of training ChatGPT. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people just think about it as kind of, a super search engine, or you kind of go out and it crawls everything and comes back with a couple paragraphs. How does that work, though, inside the organization? As you're saying, you want it to understand the sales process and what sales tools are available. How does that work in the case where you're working with a organization?
Yeah, you have to train it. You have to feed it information. And so you feed it information relative to what your business does. So if you've got a sales process that has stages and activities and exit criteria and related content, well, if you feed it that information and then you ask it a question like, I'm in stage 3, haven't talked to an executive yet. What content would you suggest? Well, if you fed it all that information it has said, you could ask that question, it can give a result. So computers are pretty good at doing what you tell them to do.
Right.
And you can tell them, and the cool thing is that now with, again, not an engineer, a little out of my lane here, but it can start connecting things that we don't have to manually connect. You don't have to say like, oh, this content piece, I'm going to manually draw a line to this stage. You can feed it things in more natural language, and then it can understand that information and then present it back when queried. And then the thing that I want to work towards is we can get a little more automated about it. That'd be pretty neat.
Right. No, I think as it starts to learn and draw those connections, right? I mean, that's really what it does beyond, like you said, just a natural logic or something. And can you talk about how do you protect that information? I mean, if we fed it our methodology, our proprietary secrets, all of our sales collateral, I don't want that to be accessible to my competitors when they go
Sure.
do a search. So how are you accommodating that?
Yeah, I mean that's the good news is that that's been a problem that's been solved for a long time around creating a lot of security and authentication with multi-tenant environments. So your information's your information, it's locked in, it's barred off from other folks, even though everything lives in Amazon or Google or one of the cloud hosting providers. So keeping everything very secure and having different access points that have access to different information with strong firewalls between them. That's absolutely critical.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I mean, I think you're ahead of the game on a lot of this as people are kind of scratching their heads trying to figure it out. Can you share a little bit about what it was like to integrate? Any lessons learned, any challenges you ran into, or I know that's an ongoing process as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on it. We're still making it better. I mean, we demoed it at the AAISP Leadership Summit last last week in Chicago, and I think the thing that I'm learning is that, like I said earlier, computers are good at what you tell them. So if you leave things out, it's not going to give you everything that you wanted. And so, but the cool thing is you can say, hey, what are the 100 things that a sales manager is going to ask this thing? Well, how's it performing? Where are the gaps? And then where are the gaps in the content that we're feeding it, which is no different than any training program that you'd have for a person. Oh, this person's terrible at demos. Well, we never taught him how to demo. So that makes sense. Same thing with the computers, only the computers are working 24/7 and they just work really fast and immediate and
Right. Don't
great.
miss anything. Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, pull out your crystal ball if you can, but I'm curious, where do you see this going? How do you see this evolving? Maybe you can just share a little bit about some of the things you're excited about or looking for as we integrate more of the kind of ChatGPT idea into coaching and sales management.
I think it gives sales managers more leverage so they can do more with less. They can become better coaches. And I think one of the things that annoys me more than anything is this whole thing where I talk to companies and I say, well, where do your sales managers spend most of your time? And in the back of my mind, I say, please don't say working deals. Please don't say working deals. And then they say, working deals.
So, and attending meetings and producing reports.
Yeah. So, and then they're on the other side. So they're over here on the deals, they're over here on the reports, and then they spend part of their time, doing motivational things with their team, which is also important. And then coaching somehow becomes that last priority because everybody's on this monthly or quarterly hamster wheel, and they say, well, I've got to get the deals closed. So a path to that is to be on the deals, but you're the manager. And then what happens is then they want to become a director or VP. Well, you can't be on a deal as a director or VP. Well, some of them are. And then it just becomes to bring the whole team to the meeting. Why don't we get our salespeople coached up and make them really good? Because what happens when you get this environment of super closers where the managers are jumping in and talking a lot, doing discovery, doing the demos, doing the proposal, all those types of things. How do you think high performers feel about that? They hate it. Bottom performers love it.
Right.
So then you get all the best people out, the worst people in, then you have a team of low performers, and that's, you kind of deserve that.
Yeah. No, and I always ask the question, if you feel like you have to jump in, every time you see that rep or you're on a sales call with them, what's happening the other 95% of the time you're not there, right? They're struggling. They haven't learned to do it themselves. But if we can use those, moments of time, precious, right? Here are the things we're going to work on. We're going to have the conversation and let's fix it, going forward. so we're not addressing the same issue. It's like Groundhog Day coaching, right? Like,
Totally. Well, and to what you just said, so that also happens on the enablement team. The enablement team says, well, we're not ready to launch this yet because, we're still working on this and working on that, working on the other. And I say, well, what are the salespeople doing right now in their meetings right now? And that's not always considered. So can we ship something fast, get it out there? Even if you, so imagine a company signs up to work with Race Company. Well, imagine a world where we could train the GPT the minute the contract's signed, or have it pre-trained because we know his content, have it pre-trained on his content. The minute the contract's signed, a manager sitting there saying XYZ happened. Boom. They haven't even scheduled the kickoff meeting to do the training yet, and you're already getting value from your engagement. So I think from a sales consultant's perspective, that's the other thing that we're really trying to focus on is like, how do we extend the value of your engagements and make the folks that you work with even more successful?
absolutely. And then, yeah, let's focus on the human element. Where do you actually need the training? Where do you need the practice? Doing the skill application side.
Yeah.
And imagine it's the same, right? If we can spend our quality time with our reps, really coaching and focusing on them and not having to do pipeline hygiene, right? Or beat them up about the next stage in the deal, right? We already have access to that. I mean, they can do that themselves. They can read the report or they can get the
Yes.
response. But now having a human conversation, at least I think that's where this evolves. But I'd love to hear, I mean, what are, 3 or 4 things that you see ChatGPT doing for the manager that free up their time to do more of that human element? I mean, you've touched on some of them, but what really happens? How does this change their daily, weekly activities?
Yeah. They get quicker access to better information that is more credible. And so let's unpack that a little bit. So quicker access is obvious. It's immediate. Better information that's more credible. Those are kind of linked together, because if I'm sitting there and saying, well, I've got this person on my team who, what have I talked about this morning? Somebody said they just won't do the activity. Well, that's tough because now we've got different directions that we can go. Do they have a time management challenge? Do they not want to do the job? Do they have a skill set challenge around using tools? Do they have a mindset challenge that thinks that activity is not the right thing to do? So I just rattled off a few different things that it could be.
Yep.
Well, if you don't do that and you just pick one, if you say, oh, they just must not think that it's important, and then they go down that path and just start coaching, they might have to backtrack all the way and realize that, oh, wow, we just rolled out this fancy sales tech tool stack and they haven't been trained on, they haven't been certified, they don't know how to, and so they're intimidated by even beginning the activity. So if the managers can then be presented with a dossier of ideas or options based on the organization's enablement, their sales methodology, and all the knowledge that's come from people before them, well, now they're in a much better position to diagnose and prioritize the right things, because coaching often falls apart. Coaching step 3 in the coaching life cycle. So I have this 5-step coaching life cycle: diagnose, prioritize, coach, hold accountable, and then do it again. Well, coaching step 3, and if you screw up diagnose and prioritize, then coaching could still work, but it's not going to have nearly the impact that it could. So I think that's the big piece of getting that fast access to better information and make the most out of their time. And then they solve that big problem because they diagnose and prioritize properly. Well, that person's built up to the next level. And so you're going to have fewer challenges with them. Now you're working on developing them into their next role, which is lower touch generally, at least in the context of what they're doing day to day with their prospects and customers. And that's just a huge time unlock for sales leaders.
No, that's really exciting. And yeah, we always talk about it creating leverage, but it only does that if you're coaching effectively, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, something you touched on, which I think is super exciting, is in that kind of diagnose and prioritize. And we talk a lot about, you don't want to coach to judgments, even though that's kind of the knee jerk, right? Is, oh, that was bad, or I didn't like that, or that's not the way I would do it. Why are you saying that? And so we need to step back and coach behaviors, right? Here's what I observed. Here's what the customer did. Maybe this is why the deal isn't moving forward. But if you can back that by data, now you have, irrefutable truth, or at least a way of supporting what you're talking about, versus oftentimes I think it's my opinion versus your opinion. And you say, well, no, you're not seeing it right. Well,
Yeah.
now we can have ChatGPT behind us with this analysis to be able to share, hey, you lose deals in this stage, or compared to others, this is what's happening. And this is why we need to do these steps. It's not my opinion, but this is
Yeah.
history shows us, and this is what 1,000 different opportunities show us, because ChatGPT can go out and look at that and give us an analysis of it. Right?
Yeah. We've been doing a lot of analysis on different risk factors that could be coached. And it's fascinating how companies have different close rates and different conversion rates depending on the bucket of deal size. And so a deal from 10,000 to 30,000 might have one conversion rate, or 30 to 80 might have another, 80 to 150 might have another. And there's different factors there. And it's not just the obvious, the bigger deals are harder, because that's not necessarily true. A couple data sets that we looked at, it was much more competitive down market. And so that's what was causing the lower conversion rates. But if you've got one salesperson that manages deals across that entire spectrum, a human brain really struggles to identify those slight changes in probability. A human can't tell the difference between a deal that's got a 31% chance of closing and a 43% chance of closing. We just can't do it. So computers can, and they're not going to be right. It's not a magic ball. It's not a crystal ball. But what it does is it can help surface risk factors to the manager so they can coach better. And that's where the idea of ChatGPT integrated into all of the things that we've talked about, with the data surfacing, hey, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the forecasting crystal ball, because those don't exist. Because if they did, there'd be $1 trillion company out there. But I can tell you all the risk factors, and I can tell you why the risk factors, and you can either accept them or dismiss them. And if you accept them, go do something about them in your next coaching conversation. Tie that into the one-on-one. There you go. Now you've got this ecosystem for coaching, instead of managers being pulled in all the different directions with all the spreadsheets and all the meetings and all that type of stuff, which isn't adding specific value to their teams.
No, that's also super exciting. It reminds me of two different challenges that we run into. We see a lot with managers is trying to get reps to identify, as you said, they're treating all their deals the same. And it's like, why are we going down this rabbit hole for this $15,000 opportunity where you have a $250,000 deal that there are 5 things you can do right now, right?
Yeah.
That you can do to increase your odds. You're going to have to sell 10 of those or 20 of those other deals. So let's prioritize. And you're right, it may be different activities and different win rates for those deals. The other piece is let's disqualify those bad deals early. And if we can get some insights from ChatGPT to say, based on the characteristics and what you've told us so far, or the information you have, this deal isn't going to close. So either get better information, go back and requalify and do your discovery and up the chances, or move on, right? Get that out of the pipeline, because it's just going to die. We know what's going to happen. It's going to die in stage 3. It's going to sit there, whatever your stage 3 is. It's going to sit there. It's going to be, oh, I'm waiting for them. They went silent. I can't get them back. And then, sometime or a couple months later, the manager is finally going to force them to get it out of the pipeline because it hasn't gone anywhere. If we can do that on day 5 instead of day 50, we've now freed up that time to focus on something else.
Yeah. Exactly. That's it.
Well, I think that's a great place to maybe kind of wrap up. I'd love for you to share, any other thoughts, insights, guidance you have on this topic. Really enjoyed the conversation, but what would you share with the audience in closing here?
If you're an executive in a company, go look at your managers and see how much time they're spending coaching, and go look at the quality of coaching that they're doing. And if they're not doing it a lot and doing it well, that's the biggest risk across your sales organization, because that's the single point of leverage that you have as an executive leader to get more out of your sales teams. And if you're a frontline manager that is stuck and saying, oh man, I got so much to do, figure out a way that you can stack your calendar to get more time to coach, because that's the thing that's going to help drive your career. It's not going to that meeting with the marketing folks or looking at the report for the 7th time. That's not going to get you anywhere.
That's fantastic. And if tools like CoachCRM can help provide a framework, provide a receptacle for that, and then tools like CoachGPT on top of that to provide us the insights and make that coaching more effective. Yeah, now we've shined a spotlight and we've made that more effective for each conversation. That's absolutely fantastic.
Love it.
All right. Good place to end. Always great talking to you. I always learn something. Look forward to seeing how this evolves, Cory. Best of luck to you.
Thanks, Ray. Appreciate it.